Hello, my name is Mari Kennan and I run the Minnesota Veterinary History Museum. Today is International Museum Day, so to celebrate, we asked you to send in some of your questions about veterinary history. Today, I'm in the anatomy collection founded by Dr. Vic Cox, and I'm going to give you guys a little peek behind the curtain as I process some of our specimens from the collection and answer some of your questions. So first, to get started, I'm going to put some gloves on to protect the specimens from me and me from the specimens, though today we're working with some skulls, so I'm a little less concerned about the chemical aspect, but just to look very professional. I have a few specimens here that I've already started by numbering, so you'll see that we have a different numbering system here for the anatomy collection. So this collection's been around for a really long time, but because of the fact that we, as the Minnesota Veterinary History Museum, just acquired this collection in 2024, all of the numbering system starts with A for anatomy, 2024, and then the number that we're on. So we right here have a couple of the numbers 170 through about 175. But first, I got to uncap my B67. Don't ask me what B67 stands for. I don't know, but it's some kind of resin. And the great thing about it is that it is reversible. So a lot of the techniques that we like to use in a museum collection is that it is something that can be reversed, that we're not permanently altering the object. So I'm going to take this B67, which we actually make in-house, it's homemade, and I'm going to give some of these guys a top coat to just get started here. It takes a little bit of time for these resin coatings to dry, which is why we usually wait in between giving the base coat, numbering, and then making the top coat. So I'm going to start by just giving a little top coat here to start us off. Perfect. It's a lot of fun to basically feel like an artist and paint on a perfect little square of resin. It's very professional. So the museum was founded in 1985 by a group of passionate faculty members, actually a few that were very much involved in this collection as well, the anatomy collection. Really, they had started actually collecting veterinary history, different artifacts and books, and putting them on small little displays in the college. But people were tossing those things out into the trash. And so they kind of realized, hey, we need to make an organized effort about this. And that's where they founded the museum. And I could not be happier that they did, because we're really one of the only institutions in the world collecting this kind of history and connecting people to the legacy of the veterinary profession. My favorite item in the collection is really hard to choose, but I'm a big fan of chickens because my family has chickens and I just think they're just chunky little dinosaurs. And so I'm always excited to see items in our collections that are related to chickens. And we have a poultry feed and tonic it's actually in our main exhibit space. Go check it out. But I just love it so much because on the side of it, it has basically a chicken, a very chunky chicken, by the way, because of course the illustrations, you always had to have very chunky livestock to show that they're very healthy, right? And a very chunky chicken sitting on top of a pile of eggs, and it just says on the side of it, eggs, eggs, eggs. And so I absolutely adore that. I'm really a big fan of anything that shows a really chunky chicken. There's always a lot of surprising things, especially when you're opening one of the books in our collection, because one of the coolest parts about our collection, especially our book collection, is that these were things that were being used by practitioners throughout their career. So you'll always find little notes or recipes written in the margins. And so it's always a surprise when you open a book and you kind of see someone's whole history of their practice within the margins of a book. Okay, so I'm finishing off the top coats on the couple of guys that I already have numbers for. All these different avian skulls. So we have right over here a blue jay. We have a duck. And I believe this guy, oh, see, this is one of the cool parts of our collection as well, is that sometimes things are yet to be identified, which means we get to do a lot of research in our collections as well, which our volunteers especially have a lot of fun with. But now that I've given top coats to a lot of these guys over here, I'm going to put them in their nice little cushy little box, which I'll organize a little bit more later. And we're going to start working on some other specimens that haven't been marked yet. So we're going to actually start with this little monkey right here. This is an old world monkey. And you can see that they've marked on the top the kind of specimen that this is, but they don't always do that. And because this is not only a specimen collection, but a bit of a historic collection that over the years has been amassed from places like Como Zoo, Minnesota Zoo, or for different farmers finding something interesting on their property, we don't always have the actual identification of what something is. So that's where research really comes into play. But for these guys, I'm just going to be putting a base coat on them. And I'm going to put it over what's already been written to preserve that as well, because I don't want this whole guy to be filled with writing. So I'm just going to keep it in the same area that there's stuff already been written. So I'm going to be putting the number right underneath here. Haunted, not really, no. I guess I'm not very in tune with that kind of thing. So maybe there's a lot of super haunted stuff and I'm just unawares of it. But I do think there's a lot of things that kind of still have a little bit of a lively spirit. I'm thinking of an orangutan skull that we have in our collection from Como Zoo. That was from this very beloved orangutan, Amigo, who passed away in 1992. And I just find him so endearing, and especially researching and finding the article talking about him passing away and how he was so loved by his zookeepers and the visitors. I still feel a lot of that that love and endearment when I look at him as well. So haunted, maybe not so much, but maybe all the guys in these collection are just a fan of me. So they're used to me. They don't feel like haunting me. I've been spooked more from the plastic models than from the actual specimens themselves of we have a big plastic model. Her name is Princess Naya. For the veterinary students, I'll be walking down the hallway a little late at night because of an event or what have you, or I'm working on a project, and she will basically pop out at me. I think she wants to scare me. So she's haunted. Or maybe she doesn't like me, but as for the actual specimens in this collection, at the very least, they're cool with me, The oldest thing in our collection is one of our books. It's called Markham's Masterpiece. It's from the 1600s, and it's one of the first widely published books on veterinary medicine. It's all about the horse. And some of the really cool things about it are, first of all, it has some illustrations in there that were made using some pretty cool historic printing techniques. So I often bring it out during some of our workshops, like our printmaking seminar. And then also, it really focuses on the farrier, which really showcases how there was a lot of different lay people with different skill sets that were involved in medical care. It wasn't all white coats. Farriers had a very big role in the medical care of animals back in the day. Next we have a gar, which is one of my favorite fishies out there in the world because you can catch them in Animal Crossing. So I was a big Animal Crossing girly back during the 2020 pandemic, so shout out to the gar. there's a lot of advancements that started out in veterinary medicine and has had a huge impact in the human medical field. And one that I'm thinking about is actually regarding the treatment of type 2 diabetes. And researchers here at the University of Minnesota, so veterinarian Ken Johnson, as well as his team, like folks like Tim O'Brien, who's actually still here at the College of Vet Med today, helped isolate amylin, which is when an excess is responsible for type 2 diabetes. And so they use the cat as an experimental model of this to be able to address this issue in cats. And lo and behold, humans also get type 2 diabetes too. So this was a huge advancement, not just for cats and for animals, but really changed the trajectory of treatment for type 2 diabetes. This is a guinea pig. I love me some rodents. I love chickens and I love rodents. I love my little guys. So we have a little guinea pig here. And why are farm animals, why do they need help with giving birth? Well, there's a few different reasons for that. First is just breeding over time, because we want bigger, stockier livestock for the different products that they provide. That means that their calves are larger too, which can sometimes lead to complications during birth. The other is financial. I mean, if your livestock are how you make your livelihood, you're going to be more likely to intervene when it comes to things like birthing, because you care about the mother and you care about the calf, and you want to make sure that birth goes smoothly because it's also your livelihood. So the virus that caused PRRS was isolated in 1991 by some researchers in the Netherlands. And there were a few different outbreaks prior to that in the 1980s in the US, as well as some other outbreaks that they thought were separate at first, caused by a different virus in Europe around the same time. And PRRS is a really great example about how diseases are not some ancient, immutable thing. Sometimes we think about them kind of just in the historic sense, but there's still a lot to be learned about diseases today, especially looking back and understanding how we learned about a disease, how that affected the management strategies for it. And so that's why I find a lot of our collections discussing different diseases to be super important to researchers. You can see this little guy here. Look at this little guy. He's way too tiny for me to try and write a number on him. I would be afraid of breaking him. So I'm going to set him aside and kind of brainstorm about how I want to do it. Sometimes we'll write little small tags, but I'm thinking that it might be best to give him his own tiny little custom box and then write the number on that. So this little friend is going to hang out here for now. Now we're going to work with a few of our articulated specimens. This right here is a perch. And actually on the bottom here, we can see a little note. Steve's first perch, June 1973. Once again, showing how this is a really cool anatomy collection, but also a historic collection, as they were figuring out different kinds of techniques for articulating and preserving these kinds of specimens. So for these articulated little guys, I'm probably going to just write the number on the bottom. I don't want to be too, I don't want it to interfere with people being able to actually see through the case here. So I'm just going to put a little nubbin right here for me to write a number on, which means he's going to hang out upside down for a bit while this dries. Now there's a lot of different items in our collection that we've had to do quite a bit of research in order to figure out exactly what, when, who, where, why, all these different questions that we had. But there's one individual in particular that some of the items that were donated to us from him are just so fun to research. And that is a veterinarian. His name was Homer C. Butler. He was a practitioner in Minnesota. He graduated from the now defunct Chicago Veterinary College in the 19-teens. And a lot of his books, he would interleave all kinds of different things, like little advertising cards or notes he had written to himself. And it's this one compendium of Materia Medica. He had written several notes. It was a draft of a letter that he was going to be writing to his wife. And boy, is it juicy. He was basically writing to her, asking her to come back to him. He had called her father. He said, leave her alone. He said, can you get our kid on the wire? And we identified who his wife was, who his kid was, all these different characters in this letter that he had wrote using things like census data. So it was such a really fun research project to figure out, wait, what is he talking about here? He's referencing some kind of event that's going on. Can we figure out when that event happened and what it was? So it was just a lot of fun playing detective to figure out exactly who he was writing this letter to and why. And you can see all of the transcription resulting from this research that me and one of our lovely volunteers did in our online collections on our website. I would say that every other week we have some kind of research adventure that we go on to be able to figure out exactly what we're looking at. This guy's a chipmunk. The chipmunk and this little guy, who's a gerbil, are probably some of my favorite articulated specimens. Once again, I am biased. I love my little guys. I used to have gerbils for a very long time. They're so crazy. I love them. But I just think the way that they posed them is so cute. So I can't get over it. So with this guy, it has some wood on the bottom. So I don't really think I want to tag on that because wood's kind of absorbent. And once again, we want things to be reversible. So I'm going to, on the same side that they wrote chipmunk, I'm just going to, on the very bottom of this pedestal, tag it. Perfect. My favorite little guy. One of my favorite parts about my job is absolutely being able to talk to people about different kinds of topics that they're excited about when it comes to veterinary history. And I get the opportunity to be able to give little mini lectures to the veterinary students through their student club. And I get requested quite often to talk about different diseases like rabies or anthrax and be able to talk about the stories behind them. And kind of as I was saying before, I think that those stories are so important for us understanding why we approach those diseases the way we do today. You would be surprised how many historical factors went into why we choose to treat a disease in a certain way. And those management strategies can be really important to look back on to see how do we want to approach the disease in the future. As well as I get to always tell little crazy little stories. I try to insert some fun little cases that I have come across in my research, like rabies used to be considered in the early 1800s to be canine madness. And there's a lot of stories of cases of people thinking that they have caught canine madness and they start barking or they're chewing on their pillow and wagging it around like a dog and they're afraid they're going to bite their wife. Things like that, to us today, we're like, okay, you're being a little dramatic. But, you know, they really thought that rabies was actually a form of hysteria and that there was more deaths being caused by the fear of rabies than by rabies itself. So there's a lot of really fun or interesting case studies from that time as they were trying to figure out exactly what rabies was. We got one more little guy here. I'm going to do, this is an ostrich skull. So huge, and he actually has two parts to him, so I'm going to have to be very careful we basically use sub-series numbers to make sure that we know this goes with this, rather than treating them as separate objects. There's a lot of best parts of my job. So many things that I love, but my favorite part is really just connecting people and inspiring people to look at veterinary medicine from a different way. I get to talk to people of all ages, including kids that are, just thinking about, hey, I like animals. Maybe I can do this as a job. They're thinking about, I want to be a veterinarian when I grow up. And I get to connect with them and show them all the really cool things that veterinarians have done throughout the years. I get to talk to a lot of veterinary students who are maybe figuring out what they want to do once they go into practice. And these historic materials are inspiring to them of thinking about, well, that's really cool. Maybe I want to go into that for research, or maybe I want to work with this kind of animal. I didn't know that. As well as being able to chat with people like our alumni or our researchers or established practitioners in the field who have done so much and have so many cool stories that I get to learn something new from them every day. And it's so inspiring to me. And so I would say that there's so many amazing parts of my job. And I'm just so grateful to be here and have this kind of institution that can preserve the stories of veterinary medicine and be able to inspire so many different people of so many different ages and from so many different communities to think about how amazing the stories and legacy are of veterinary medicine. So I'm close to finishing up here. We've gotten through a good number of different skulls today, including our nice little ostrich, we got some monkeys, we got some birds, we got a gar. I mean, a good day in the collection, if I do say so myself. So thank you for coming along with me. Thank you guys for your questions. I am so excited that you're helping celebrate International Museum Day with me. And I hope that you continue to support this museum, one of the only museums in the world on veterinary medicine. We would love it if you would help us reach our goal of $5,000 to help sustain our institution, our workshops, collections like this one, as we work to preserve the past and use it to inspire the future generations of veterinary medicine. Thank you.